It is 7 o'clock, and I'd like to start on time because I want to keep people here for the period of time that we designated and get you home. I know you have a lot to do. If you are coming in, there are seats up front. Please come up front. If you're sitting in the back, trying to think that you're not going to participate in the conversation, come on up to a table that has white sheets of paper on the table. So Lee, I'm talking to you. Come on up. You come on up. Join another table. I do know a lot of you, and I will call you out by name if I need to. So come on up. Join another table. I am going to be challenged throughout this entire presentation because I have to stay from here to here. And if anyone's ever seen me present, that is not my style. My style is to walk all the way around all the time. So welcome to the second community event to talk about strategic master planning or facility master planning for Granville schools. First of all, I want to say thank you. I was worried that we had such a large crowd at the first event that maybe we wouldn't have people return, and we did. So that's fantastic because this is the actual opportunity for you to give your perspective and your input into the process, which is probably the most critical aspect of this whole entire process that we'll go through. So the last meeting I sat and talked at you a long time. My goal tonight is to talk less. I'm still going to talk at you for a little bit of time, but I'm going to talk less, and you're going to talk to your neighbors a little bit more, which is great. And if you don't get to know each other tonight, you know, there will be a second opportunity, or another opportunity on April 15th to regroup and reconnect. So I'm going to jump in. This is what you should expect tonight. So expect that you are going to get up, walk around, and then come back. You're going to talk to your neighbors. You're going to have a lot of conversation. But what I want to do is give the opportunity for Brittany to talk a little bit about our financial update. We're going to talk about some timelines and triggers. We're going to ask you to articulate your hopes and fears. So, you know, just kind of thinking about this whole strategic planning task force process. What are your hopes and fears in this process? What do you hope happens? What do you fear will happen? I think it's good to kind of talk about those initially up front. I'm going to say this probably 50 times tonight. We are in the planning process, not the building process. That is a separate process that will follow after we develop a strategic plan or a facility master plan. We're going to do some activities. We're going to do a lot of table discussion, and you're going to be responding to prompts. And somebody at your table, there are some board members, there are some task force members, there are some administrators at each table. They'll help you document some of your thoughts, but I think it's important for table discussions to have the majority of our time together. And we're going to identify the next steps, and then the third community event is April 15th. Okay? So, before I move forward, if we have board members here, please stand up and wave your hand. You should be spread out. Okay, thank you. If you are a part of our strategic planning task force, please stand up, wave your hands, or at least, yeah, there we go. We have a lot of people here that have been having these conversations for roughly 2 years, so use them and ask questions of them throughout the process. And then I want to thank you again for being here. And I'm going to kick it off talking a little bit about some of the 5 areas that we've been prioritizing and focusing on. As I said at the last meeting, there are 5 areas that we've been focusing our efforts, looking at enrollment, housing analysis, fiscal impact, facility studies, and programming. So those have been our 5 core areas of focus for the last 2 years, kind of collecting data so that we can come and share information about what we expect to see over the next several years in Granville schools. I highlighted one thing, recent conversations and comments to Heath City Council regarding density and the new community authority that they're establishing potentially for the MI subdivision. We are continuing to have conversations with our legislators. We're continuing to have conversations with East City Council and East City Mayor related to the density of that project. So those comments, that work will continue to happen as we navigate their planning process. The next is the state funding formula. The governor released his proposal. Brittany's going to get up and talk a little bit about the impact of that and kind of some things that are in our future related to funding. So that's really as far as our focus areas. Those are the only updates I want to provide before I turn it over to, and we went all the way back. All right. Exit slip.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being here.
There you go.
You don't know what happened. Is it going? Here we go. Might be sticking. Yeah. There we go. All right. Brittany, here we go. Now you saw what we're going to talk about.
Okay, just wanted to give a quick update based on the governor's proposed budget. If you were at our last meeting, you heard me talk about with state funding, we are on what's called the guarantee. So as enrollment increases, we would not see an increase in our state funding. However, under the governor's proposal, our funding would actually decrease. So what the proposal includes is elimination of the guarantee. So for fiscal year 26, which is next year, the guarantee would be reduced by 5% and then 10% in the following year. So during that 2-year budget cycle, that's approximately $1 million less than what we had included in the forecast. If you extend that over the 5-year forecast period, it's a little over $2 million. So the graph up here, the top line, the light gray line, represents our cash balance in the 5-year forecast period based on what we filed in November, and then the line below that represents our cash balance under the governor's proposal. So it's important for us to stay engaged in that process as the budget moves through the legislature. This is the first step in that process, so we're hopeful that if the guarantee is eliminated, it is for districts that have declining enrollment, not increasing enrollment like our situation. So that's important for us to understand because it is a change from last time and would obviously impact us and our financial outlook given the Heath development that we talked about at the last meeting. So there's a lot of unknowns as far as the timeline and all this is concerned, but we wanted to put some big ticket items that we know and the dates that we know on the screen for you to kind of wrap your head around the timing of everything. So we know that in 26 or 27, we're going to be coming for the renewal of the current income tax. So I have that as expiring in 28. So for us to be able to continue that without delay, we'll be renewing that in 26 or 27. In 28, we have 2 items. The intermediate school bonds, will have the final payment on those, as well as the expiration of the current income tax levy. Then in 29, this is a highlight from our 5-year forecast. That is when we are projecting a negative cash balance. So again, we're not sure exactly when we would need a new operating levy, but that is one point in time that we can look at as an indicator for when that new levy would be needed. And then finally, in 2031, that is when the library bonds will be paid. So that would be when the final outstanding debt that we have for existing bonds would be paid. So those 2 bond payments are important to understand because in all of this, we're obviously talking about a potential new building. And the thought would be to try to align any new bond requests of the community with those existing bonds rolling off to try to keep the millage and the current tax level the same for our community.
Okay, so just to add on a little bit about what Brittany shared, from a legislative process, the governor proposes his budget, then it goes to the House. The House then takes what he created and they make it their own. Then they send it to the Senate. and then the Senate sends it back to the House, and then it goes into caucus, and it looks very different than any other version that we've ever seen. So that tends to be the the process that occurs. Dan, did I mess that up at all? Slightly?
It's conference, not caucus.
Caucus, yes, conference committee, yes, correct. So just so you're aware of how that process works, it is a lengthy process, but they have to finish by June 30 of the summer. So, so just adding on to that. So here's the in-between. So I think it's important for everyone to understand, so if we're talking about, you know, the future facility plan, what is the plan for the gap? You know, we don't just build a building immediately. So how do we navigate growth that occurs that we don't potentially have space for in the in-between? And so from our standpoint, what we tried to do is look at this in increments of 100 students. Why 100 students? Well, we're projecting that we'll probably add about 60 new homes a year, minimum. And if you think about it right now, Willow Bend is building out right now, and there's 67 homes in that location. So if you think about it in the context of 67 homes, that's about 100 students every single year, based on our yields. So we thought about sharing it in this context. You know, our initial count is close to 2,600 students. And if we grow another 100 students, we'll be able to absorb, you know, those students in our current facilities, but we might start to see larger class sizes, especially at the K-6 level. Why? Because those are the facilities that we're closest to capacity. So, you know, we will be pushing some upper limits of class sizes based on, you know, obviously our comfort of what we would like to see from an educational perspective. But once you push past 2,700 students, you're going to be in a modular environment. Now, modulars are not necessarily unfamiliar to Granville. On this property, at several points in our history, there were modular buildings in the back of, near the shop, the career tech environment, and out near, behind the middle school. So we probably are going to be looking at some type of modular environment for a period of time to get us through the gap years before a facility is potentially designed and built. The design process takes about, what, 12 months, 12 to 16 months-ish, and then build is about 18 to 24 months. So, you know, there's a little bit of a runway there that you have to have from a planning standpoint. But we will probably need a new facility at some level around 3,000 students. And I didn't put a timeline there because we can't really predict when the students are going to come to us. We just know that when we reach certain thresholds, we're going to respond a certain way. And that might be 2 modulars, that might be 6. It just depends. But we do want it, we want to be transparent about what that looks like in a growth environment when you're preparing to potentially build facilities, okay, or a facility. All right? So where are we at in the process? We are at the process of connecting with stakeholders. The next step after tonight, you are going to be creating the priorities. So what we are going to be doing tonight is establishing some priorities to then take back to the task force. And the task force is then going to create some options. And, you know, it could be option A, B, C, or D. Sometimes you have 6 options. But they're going to create options based on those priorities. So tonight is absolutely critical to provide direction to the strategic planning task force, who's going to get a little bit more granular on your behalf. And then when we come back in April, you're going to get a chance to provide input on those options that have been developed. Does that make sense to everyone? Give me a little bit of physical feedback. Okay, yes, excellent, thank you. So really, we're in that connect phase with stakeholders, and that the next step will be the creating stage, and that's going to be with the task force and at the third meeting. So that's our process that we're going to align with. So the first thing I want you to do, and I'm actually going to jump ahead. No. Okay. Hopes and fears. I want you to think a little bit about this question. What are your hopes and fears related to growth in Granville schools? Take a minute to not talk to your neighbor, but just think to yourself. A lot of us don't get think time anymore. Take a minute to think for yourself, what are my hopes and fears as we grow? And then I want you to have a table conversation, introduce yourselves to one another, because you're going to be talking all night, and just share briefly some of your hopes and fears, all right? So I'm going to time it, 1 minute. I don't have a watch, but I'm an old person who thinks I do. So I'm going to give you a minute to think and then process with your table. Okay. Hopefully you've had a chance to at least talk a little bit at your tables about your hopes and fears. Keep those in mind. And you'll probably have more time to share those when you get into the priority conversation. So don't think that you're not going to have the opportunity to talk. I'm going to invite Jen Fuller up. So Jen is the primary architect or principal architect of Manning and Howie. She's going to talk a little bit about our current schools because that does factor in the facility master planning process. So Jen, come on up, and I will probably drive for you. Stay in this area. Yeah.
I feel like a goalie right now. And I've never played goalie, so that's exciting. Hi, Jen Fuller with Manning Howie, as Mr. Brown said. Just kind of a high level of your buildings. Since we're talking about facilities, we thought we would remind you, if you're familiar with them or maybe you're not familiar with everything that they have to offer. So we just want to highlight the elementary school. There are a lot of additions on this building. It's center of town. So if you're driving through town in the morning or in the afternoon, I'm sure you know that their kids are coming in or kids are coming out, right? So that's great. It's walkable, right? So these are some of the things that we want you to think about when you think about your facilities. If you like that, love that, hate it, it's going to be part of this gathering process too. It's 105,000 square feet. That may or may not mean something to you guys. We're just kind of giving you some data. Sits on 11.5 acres, and we've got our current enrollment just so you can kind of see where that lands. I guess maybe we'll just go to the next one. We don't want to spend a lot of time on these, but we want you to be familiar with it. So the intermediate school is a 2001 build, so pretty new compared to the other. There are no additions on it. 84,000 plus, and about 45 buildable acres. So we know there's a little more property out that way. And this is, I think, one of the newer in the building or in the district. Some of the things too, before we go on to this building, our team did evaluate all the buildings from a civil engineering perspective, a landscape perspective, and then mechanical, electrical, plumbing, architecture, access control, safety, security, just to kind of give an overall, I think, you know what the buildings have to offer operationally, so we just sort of wanted to feed into that a little bit, collect information on when warranties might be expiring or what those different systems had to offer. They're in really great shape. There's obviously some things that can be improved, especially when you look at a building like that elementary that's got all those additions. Now you've got maybe different systems that are kind of competing with each other. So that is all part of a plan, ultimately, on upgrading systems or if something were to need replaced. And so next we have the middle school, high school, where we're at right now. So you found your way here, so I suspect you know this building a little bit, or at least where it is. And this was originally 1960, and then it's had a couple additions. It's middle school and high school, and we've just got the square footage there on the separations, although I know there are some mixed spaces, so that might not be entirely accurate. And then we're about 25 acres here, and obviously there's a lot of athletic fields that come with this property too. So that's really great for your district to have all of those things kind of in one site. And again, as I mentioned, we've done sort of analysis on systems here as well. And then that's just going to inform us and the higher level planning team as we start looking at options and what these buildings can support. So it's similar to that capacity piece. We know how many students it's going to hold. We also know the age of things that are happening in your buildings and then the life of those systems and how that's going to inform us moving forward.
So just to put a pin on our existing facilities a little bit, and Peg, you'll remember these days, because when I first came, you were the treasurer, and for a long period in Granville schools, we deferred a lot of maintenance. We weren't able to keep up with a lot of the HVAC needs and replacements on cycle, and so over the last, I would say, 8 years, when we moved to create the Permanent Improvement Fund, that is when we really started to hit the accelerator on addressing some of the major costs that need to be replaced in facilities. Just think about your home. You know, you have a boiler go out, you have air conditioning units go out. Same is true for a school district. But if you defer maintenance, it only compounds the problem. So we've really been trying to catch up. We've been utilizing some of the funds that you've given to us for that purpose, to get our facilities in a place where they can survive a little bit longer in the growth cycle. So that's been an important piece. The other thing that I would say is, another thing that is fantastic about the intermediate school is it has an 88-acre land lab around it that is absolutely beautiful. Jim Redding's responsible, well actually Jim Redding's students are responsible for the creation of that about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. If you haven't been out there, go out there because it's really cool. So, and it's a community asset. So, when you walked into this room tonight, you had a disposition, okay? And that disposition, I want you to align with the four words up there. When you came in, were you here thinking about the fiscal side of this conversation? Were you coming in thinking about the academic issues or concerns? Were you coming in and thinking about their tradition or status quo, keeping Granville the way that it is? Or were you coming in with an efficiency and logistics mindset? So now I'm going to get you up, moving, and then back to your seat. So I work with kindergartners at times. I hope you do better than that. So here's what I want you to do. If you came in and you were thinking about fiscal, I want you to go to that corner. Okay? Don't move yet. Fiscal over here. If you came in and you were thinking about academics, you're going to that back corner. If you came in and you were thinking about tradition and status quo, you're going back to that corner. And if you came in thinking about efficiency and logistics, you're going to that corner. It's called Four Corners. Move now. you are going to have a lot of time now to engage with your table in some real conversations around the priorities. So we have 4 prompts for you. Someone at the table at the end of the 10-minute conversation related to each prompt is going to create a priority statement that is based off of the conversation, the aggregate of the conversation that you had. So if you can come to kind of consensus about what priority you want people to focus on based on the prompt, you want to write that down on the paper. Okay, because all these papers are going to be aggregated and then given to the task force to work with as far as creating a little bit of a North Star for them to kind of follow through the development of the options. So the first priority, what should our priorities be related to land acquisition? All right, so things to consider. Repurposing land the district already owns, acquiring land through purchase, acquiring land through development donations, think about water and sewer availability, think of other things that you should create as part of the priorities for the task force to look at when they're developing options related to land acquisition. All right, so you have 10 minutes, kind of track it, 10 minutes, there you go, 7:36. You're gonna have 10 minutes to talk and then create one priority statement for your table. Jim, you have a question.
At the last meeting, you talked about development, possibly giving you land for school.
That would be acquired land through development donations.
So has there been any more talk on that?
That there is nothing in writing.
Okay.
It's on the plot map, but nothing has been signed by Granville Schools and MI Homes. Okay? All right, you have 10 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. Raise your hand if you moved to Granville for the quality of the schools and the quaint community that was built in the 1800s. How many of you thought about the roads that you would be traversing every single day in this quaint little village when you made that decision to buy? Okay, some of you were very forward thinking. So that's just a teaser to get you thinking about transportation. All right, so what should our priorities be related to transportation? I want you to think about congestion. I mean, obviously we just added a roundabout, which has helped some with the morning traffic. Think about arrival and dismissal times, time on bus. So think about that in relation to the geographic boundary that you saw at our last meeting. The geographic boundary that is as far north as McKean Township and as far south as Union Township. Think about that. Think about the number of buses necessary, staffing, and other concerns related to traffic. And yes, Jeremy?
Do you know off the top of your head, can you tell us about how many students ride the bus to school and how many are drive or are driven?
Not enough. Let me stand right in front of here and say, we have buses that provide transportation for every student. And that would be the most efficient mode of transportation because most of our buses are 77. We have a few 84 passenger buses, but 77 students can fit on a bus and it takes up a little less roadway space than 50 to 60 cars.
Is it 50-50 split?
I'm not going to guess.
Worthless.
I am worthless. And I'm glad you're not at the table with my wife, because she would agree. No, but we do have a lot of people that drive their students to school, but you should consider all of those factors when talking about transportation. Remember, what you're trying to create is a priority statement to give to the task force to consider related to transportation and some of the issues that we face in Granville schools. Okay? You have 10 minutes starting now, so it's 7:50. At 8 o'clock, we're going to end this topic. All right, so 10 minutes just went really quickly again. So take the next minute, make sure that you capture your thought on your chart paper if you haven't done so. 1 minute left. And then we're going to transition to the third priority.
I said incentivize.
All right, the next priority. So if you aren't aware, right now Granville is grade banding. All right, so that means that all kindergartners go to the same building. They are all in the same grade band. In a lot of school districts across the state, there are K-5 buildings or K-6 buildings that there are multiple grade levels within one building, and then another building has other students that are in the same grades in those buildings, K through 5, K through 6. But we in Granville right now are grade banded. So that's the next topic of conversation. What should the priority be for grade and building configurations within Granville schools? Think about number of transitions. So just FYI, transitions are disruptive to students' learning. So there's educational research on that. So creating multiple transitions can be challenging from an academic perspective. Those people that were back in the academic wing, I can share research at our third meeting about that. But think about transitions, relocations, logistical constraints, staffing, and other. Okay? So when I say relocation, that means like if you choose a different structure, you might have to relocate people from an existing facility to a different facility. Whether you call it redistricting or relocation, whatever that is, that's kind of what I mean about that. Logistics and logistics constraints kind of dovetails into some of the land and transportation conversations that we just had. So all those, thinking about what is our core mission, which is to educate students, and what should we share as priorities for grade configurations or building configurations to the task force. You have 10 minutes to talk about grade configuration. Thank you. take a minute and jot your priority down. No time flies when you're having fun. All right, who's going to make a prediction about the last priority? Come on, what do you think? My fiscal group over here, come on. Oop. Yeah, I am. Yeah, come on, there we go. What should the priority be related to the cost of options? All right, so think about it. Do we want the lowest base cost? I mean, do people say Pinto model anymore? I mean, we used to talk about that all the time. Some of you can relate. Moderate enhancements or best in class or other. Okay, so think about the cost implications to the previous conversations that you've had, and think about what priority statement you want to share with the task force, because it really does guide their thinking in what they create as far as options that they're going to present back to you. So think about the cost side of the equation and talk about it at the table level. Create your priority statement. You have 10 minutes. So it's 8:14. We'll come back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, take a minute and jot down your cost priority for the task force to consider. So the last thing that I want you to do, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do it, is there a key priority that we didn't ask you about? Have a table conversation, 5 minutes. If there's something else that we should have asked you about that we didn't, jot it down. Okay? 5 minutes.
Not quite as categories, but we're trying to make it work. That's right. Are you getting the She just sent me a text and said, do I need to go get them? I gotta get out of it.
Secondary colors, my graphs can't all just be in shades of blue. So my graph is like the light green, like you need to take like orange rather than all this.
as you're finishing jotting those down, I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the next steps and some dates that I want you to remember moving forward. So the first thing that I want you to know is we are going to take all this information, bring it to our next task force meeting, which is on March 11th. And our task force is going to read through, many of them are here, but some of them couldn't be here. They're going to read through this information and start to develop options aligned with some of the priorities. I understand that some of the priorities might be competing. That's why you create multiple options. So the options should align ultimately with some of the priorities that you establish. We're going to start that work on March 11th. We're going to finish that work on April 8th. And in the process, in between, our consultant is going to start applying some costs, current costs to some of the options that we start to articulate. At the April 15th meeting, what you will see is multiple options, and then the process that we'll go through is kind of the pros and cons to both, or all of the options. So that you're going to say, okay, if option A is, I'm not even going to say one because then it will be in the newspaper that that's what we're doing. So put your own option in your mind. And what is the cost associated with, what are the pros and cons to that specific option? And we're going to read that feedback and go through that process, almost like a gallery walk around this room. So think about that, and that should keep you wanting to come back on April 15th and tell your neighbors to come as well. So April 15th, and like I put on there, board recommendation May, that is 100% in pencil. If we need to go back and circle back, I've made the comment to Alan before that in COVID, Dr. Wigan came up with the phrase to me, write your plan in pencil, don't write it in pen. The same is true for the facility master plan. We're going to write this plan in pencil, and it probably will adjust, but at least it will be based on the community's feedback and the priorities established by you. So that is really ultimately our goal. The last thing that you have to do before you leave, and I appreciate all of you staying as long as you have, is I would like you to, there's an exit slip on your table. The question that we want you to answer is, what facility enhancements would you like to see in the options? So if there's something out there that you're like, you know what, I wish Granville would have X. Or it could be conceptual, like I wish Granville had all-day kindergarten for everyone. Some of those types of things could be added in on the enhancement side of the equation. Remember when it said moderate enhancements? We want to know what some of the enhancements are that you would like to see in Granville schools. So, and that's more from a facility or operating perspective. Mr. Bernath, raise your hand. Okay, there's a little tub. That is your exit slip. So you fill that out now, don't leave. Not allowed to. We're keeping you hostage until you fill out the paperwork, then you can leave. But I want to thank you very much on behalf of the board, on behalf of the administration, on behalf of the task force that has dedicated many, many hours of their lives to the purpose of serving our schools. I want to thank you for participating in this process, and we encourage you to tell others to come back. Just so you know, just like we did at the first meeting, the presentation will be on the website hopefully tomorrow, once Glenn works his magic. We are also going to put the prompts in a survey to send out as well, so people can go. So we have a broader network than just you who participated tonight, although I think it matters that you were here because you got to hear all the other conversation and it wasn't in a vacuum. So, but we will create an opportunity for you to provide, or people to provide input online as well. So, Thank you. Mr. Bernath will be at the back door collecting exit tickets, and we appreciate your input. Thank you.